Hello, children. How are you all doing today? Welcome to Karadi Path Power English classes. Today, we will be looking into session number 10. But before we begin our session, let's do a focus. So, quickly sit comfortably on a chair, sit relaxed, open your palms, place them on your lap, close your eyes, and imagine you are on top of a hill, sitting under a tree and trying to meditate. The air is chilly and you begin to shiver. But you continue with your meditation. The grass under you is equally cold and brittle. Your back itches, but you are determined not to break your meditation. Suddenly, you feel something crawling on your arm. You open one eye to see what it is, and you find a tiny squiggling worm. Ouch, you scream and jump. Your meditation is now broken. Slowly open your eyes, children. Now, let's practice a few sight words from the story The Bookworm. Children, please repeat these words after the voice on the video.
Boy, boy, boy. Of, of, of. Nose, nose, nose. Character, character, character. Always, always, always. Buried, buried, buried. Some, some, some. Book, book, book. Or, or, or. Other, other, other. Rarely, rarely, rarely. Playground, playground, playground. Found, found, found. Beneath, beneath, beneath. School, school, school. Librarian, librarian, librarian. Affectionately, affectionately, affectionately. Devoured, devoured, devoured. Library, library, library. Scent, scent, scent. Paper, paper, paper. Strange, strange, strange. Taunts, taunts, taunts. Children, children, children. Opened, opened, opened.
So now children, it's story time. Now you'd be listening to the story, The Bookworm. So sit in a comfortable position, keep your listening ears open and listen carefully. Also, watch the sentence on the screen scroll by. Here we go.
This is the story, The Bookworm. You can read along with Madhavan. You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear Karadi's cane tap, like this. Let us begin now.
Hi, I'm Madhavan, and I would like to tell you about a very special young boy that I once knew. He's a grown man now and a very famous artist. But when he was young, things were very different. We used to call him Strange Silent Sesha. Would you like to know why? Will you read with me? Sesha Sai was a boy of 10, and he had a magnificent nose. It was a nose that many people would say had character. It was also a nose that people rarely ever saw because it was always buried in some book or the other. He took his books everywhere. He rarely spoke, and while most other kids were out in the playground, he was found beneath a tree with his nose buried in his book. The only person he came close to speaking to was the school librarian. Sesha, as his mother affectionately called him, devoured books the way some people devoured food. Every Thursday, he'd go to the library and pick out a new book. He would pick the book up and feel it in his hand, gently bobbing it up and down. He'd close his eyes, open the book, and savor the scent of paper. Only after this elaborate ritual did Sesha decide if he was interested in the book or not. Most of the time, he was. Then he would head over to the librarian, give her a little smile and a nod as if to say, "Thank you," and leave, his nose in his book. The other children thought he was strange and huddled together and made songs about him that they sang as he walked by.
There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look. There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look. Does he have a nose? We wonder if it blows. Does he have a mouth? Is there someone who knows? Does he have lips? Are they pink, do you think? Or does he have eyes and breathe only ink? There goes Sesha, his nose in his book. Wouldn't give anyone else a look.
But Sesha was not bothered by the taunts of the other children. His books were his world. Whenever he opened a book, he felt like a great explorer navigating a sea of words. It was always a great adventure. Sesha knew that books could take you places that most people only dreamed about. Why? Last week, he was a warrior, deep in the forests of Africa. He could make weapons out of sharp stones and medicines from leaves. He even helped a hurt tiger by bandaging its tail. He wrote down the ingredients for the medicine in his little brown notebook. Sesha carried his brown notebook with him everywhere and would furiously write in it from time to time. Nobody knew what was in it. They heard it contained many strange secrets. They heard it had rainbow-striped tigers and horses with wings that came alive when you saw them. Rohan and Rohit Raman were brothers in Sesha's class. They were also the unofficial rulers of the playground. Most of the other children stayed out of their way. They were forever tripping or pushing the smaller children or tying their shoelaces together when they weren't looking. The only person who wasn't afraid of the Raman brothers was Sesha. This was because he was too busy reading to notice. The Raman brothers, however, had noticed him sitting by himself under a tree and didn't take very kindly to the lack of respect. One Thursday, they sat on the bench outside the library, huddled together under their raincoats. Sesha came walking down the path as usual, his nose buried in his book. And before you knew it, Rohit's big boots sprang out and sent Sesha sprawling to the ground. His book went flying out of his arms and into a puddle of brown. The brothers clutched their stomachs and laughed as Sesha watched the precious pages of his brown notebook slowly fill with mud. Sesha stood up, his eyes brimming with tears. He marched up to the Raman brothers, who were laughing so hard they couldn't even stand straight. All the other children stopped to watch the astonishing sight of Sesha. Strange, silent Sesha stand up to the Raman brothers. The Raman brothers had stopped laughing. They were too shocked to react. You bullies, Sesha spluttered. There was silence. The only sound was the sound of rain falling on the pavement where the three boys stood. Then, suddenly, the silence was shattered by Rohan's thunderous belly laugh that rippled through the playground. Sesha picked up his book and ran home, big wet drops of rain and tears streaming down his face. News travelled fast. By the next day, every child in the school had heard about the showdown in the playground. Hey, strange silent Sesha walked up to the Raman brothers. Strange silent Sesha couldn't even get a word out. The Raman brothers took complete advantage of the situation.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When he utters, does he stutter? Can he mutter? Can he moan? Can he mumble without a fumble? Can he manage even a groan?
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
When his lips slip, feed me, and he mouth the words his eyes bleed, and he shut his mouth and throw up beer.
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
When his lips slip, feed me, and he mouth the words his eyes bleed, and he shut his mouth and throw up beer.
It looks so funny, sounds so weird.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook.
Strange silent Sesha, his nose in a book, his eyes reading words that his mouth mistook. Strange silent Sesha, even stranger now, also very silly, like a spluttering cow.
The taunts never used to hurt Sesha before, but now they pricked him, and he wished they would stop. Sesha sat through his classes in silence. Every now and then, Rohit or Rohan would call out from the back, "Stuttering Sesha, why don't you say something?" And the class would erupt in laughter. It wasn't that the children were cruel. They were just having too much fun to realize how hurtful words can be. They didn't know that Sesha wasn't strange or silent or silly or any of the nasty things they called him. He was just afraid of being laughed at. Then, one day, during geography class, Mrs. Raj talked about Bengal tigers. Sesha knew all about tigers. He'd once read a whole book on them. On any other day, his ears would have perked up with interest. But today, he was barely listening. "And who knows what a group of tigers is called?" asked Mrs. Raj. "Sesha?" Mrs. Raj's voice rang out. Sesha looked up to see Mrs. Raj smiling at him expectantly. He stood up and started to speak. He fell silent as sniggers rippled through the classroom. Mrs. Raj shushed the class with one stern look. He tried again. He heard the Raman brothers laughing from the back, and he fell silent and stared at his shoes. He felt Mrs. Raj's hand on his shoulder and looked up to see her holding a piece of chalk in her outstretched arm. Sesha picked up the chalk and walked to the blackboard. He drew 2 lines, and then 2 more, and 2 more, and before you knew it, a tiger emerged with a tail and long, majestic stripes on his body. The class watched in amazement as Sesha's hands flew quickly and deftly over the blackboard. Beautiful white strokes filled the board. He drew another tiger right next to the first one, and another one, and another one, and soon there were 6 magnificent striped tigers on the board. It looked as though they would start roaring any second. The class broke out into a thunderous applause. Then, in big white letters below the drawing, Sesha wrote S-T-R-E-A-K, streak. Rohan's voice rang out from the back of the class. Looks like he's describing himself. Hey, Sesha, I think you mean freak. A group of tigers is called a streak, Rohan. But you would know that if you read more and talked less, said Mrs. Raj. The class erupted in laughter, and suddenly the Raman brothers didn't feel so lord and rulerly anymore. They went red in the face and scowled at all the children laughing and pointing at them. Very good, Sesha, said Mrs. Raj, as he placed the chalk in her hand. Thank you, Mrs. Sesha paused. Thank you, miss, he said, and sat down at his desk. Mrs. Raj smiled at him. Maybe, she continued, looking at the Raman brothers. Next time, you boys will learn to open your books and close your mouths. The class burst into laughter again. Only this time, it was the Raman brothers whose noses disappeared in their textbooks. Hey, Sesha heard a voice behind him whisper. Where did you learn to draw like that? From a book, said Sesha shyly. Can you show me? Asked another boy. Sesha nodded, grinning shyly, and said, Tomorrow. And with that, strange, silent Sesha opened his notebook to the lesson on Bengal tigers as Mrs. Raj's voice filled the classroom. He had a feeling that his nickname wouldn't last very long. And he was right. Because from that day on, when his classmates spoke of Sesha, they referred to him as Sher Shah, the Tiger King. And as for the Raman brothers, it wasn't long before they too were a part of the line that followed Sesha into the library every Thursday morning, where Sesha, with his elaborate ritual, would pick out a book for every student.
Now let's do an activity, children. This activity is called expressive reading. Let me read out a few lines from the story, children. I want you all to repeat these lines after me. Whenever he opened a book, he felt like a great explorer, navigating a sea of words. It was always a great adventure. Sesha knew that books could take you places that most people only dreamed about. Why? Last week, he was a warrior deep in the forests of Africa. He could make weapons out of sharp stones and medicines from leaves. He even helped a hurt tiger by bandaging its tail. He wrote down the ingredients for the medicine in his little brown notebook. Sesha carried his brown notebook with him everywhere and would furiously write in it from time to time. Nobody knew what was in it. They heard it contained many strange secrets. They heard it had rainbow striped tigers and horses with wings that came alive when you saw them. Now, children, let's also watch the video. I want you all to silently watch the video and then try to expressively read these lines. All right, let's begin, children.
Whenever he opened a book, he felt like a great explorer navigating a sea of words. It was always a great adventure. Sesha knew that books could take you places that most people only dreamed about. Why? Last week, he was a warrior deep in the forests of Africa. He could make weapons out of sharp stones and medicines from leaves. He even helped a hurt tiger by bandaging its tail. He wrote down the ingredients for the medicine in his little brown notebook. Sesha carried his brown notebook with him everywhere and would furiously write in it from time to time. Nobody knew what was in it. They heard it contained many strange secrets. They heard it had rainbow-striped tigers and horses with wings that came alive when you saw them.
Now Karadi has to say goodbye to you. We will meet again soon with another interesting session. Until then, you may listen to the session again and enjoy performing the modules. Bye bye.